people here. We're going to start very promptly because our first speaker is Steve Hedley, and he has to go fairly soon. Just a couple of things. We're hoping the meeting will run for an hour and a half, but if we have a lot of contributions, we will carry on till 9, but it won't go on any longer than that. And just a bit of housekeeping. Could you just make sure you stay on mute if you're not speaking, because otherwise it really can be quite disruptive. So we've got 4 speakers tonight. We've got Steve Hedley, we've got Ian Hodson has sent us a message by video. We've got Felicity Dowling, and we've got Dave Hill speaking tonight. So I think we'll just kick off straight away, and I'll invite Steve Hedley. We're expecting about 7 minutes for each speaker. So, Steve, are you there? Steve Hedley? You're actually muted at the moment. Steve, I can see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Right, okay. It wasn't. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks, Steve.
Right, it was saying the host wouldn't let me unmute, so
we
got that. I don't know. Anyway, look, I'm really sorry. I've got guests in the house, and I'm not feeling very well. I've got some sick kind of upset stomach, so I do really appreciate, Chair, that you've let me speak first. So thank you for that. I'd like to start by just giving a brief analysis of where I think we are. And I think, having attended the meeting with Roger the other day, I think it's quite sort of not far off the analysis that we already talked about. We've had an incredibly low turnout, which is, well, it's indicative of people's absolute lack of choice, really, between the two main parties. The system that we've got, the first past the post system, means it was either going to be the Conservatives or Labour, and really in this election it was only ever going to be Labour. We've had different independents standing. Jeremy Corbyn was really good getting elected. We've had another couple of independents up and down the country, but by and large Labour got back with increased majorities, even though the turnout was massively low. I mean, where we are down in Newham, we had one place where we were looking at the polling station, and the turnout was 35% in that particular polling station. So working class people, although some of them have come out and voted Labour, in some areas up to 65% of them have not even been motivated to get up and make an X in a box. And I think that is quite worrying, but also indicative that they don't have any illusions in Starmer that is going to make their life better. The theme of this is a campaign for a new Workers' Party. Now, I'm going to be absolutely quite ruthless in what I'm doing. I think people are looking for a left-wing messiah, just the way they did in Corbyn. I think we've got several would-be messiahs lining up to fill that position. And I think this is the wrong approach. I think any party that we have needs to be founded in the working class, needs to be in the working class, and needs to have a programme, not a leader. We were at a hustings where we had, we weren't even finished the hustings, and we had 2 alternative workers' parties foisted on us with 2 alternative leaders, one of them being George and one of them being Andrew Feinstein. Now, I don't know these people. They might be fine people. I don't know what their record is, but the reality is this: it's putting the cart before the horse. We need to have a party before we can choose a leader, and the party has to choose leaders democratically. It can't be another stitch-up. Because the problem is this: we've got a load of well-meaning middle-class liberals, the sort of Corbyn cult, if you like, who like to go around and shout Jeremy Corbyn and wave flags. But what did they actually achieve? They achieved nothing. They achieved zilch. And that was because the first time they came up against the right wing of the Labour Party, let alone the British ruling class, they ran for cover. And that was including Jeremy, including Corbyn, who fed one good comrade to the other, after the other, to the wolves. They try to save himself. And, I'm sorry if this analysis offends everybody, but I think it's necessary to say it. Then we had the alternative that we're offered then is George Galloway, who's indulging in the most heinous dog whistle politics, comparing people, economic migrants or refugees, we don't know because they've not been assessed, as illegal aliens coming in on the south coast. It sounds like Farage, who who have no doubt would Galloway would do a lash up with, and he thought it would bring him into some sort of importance and power. So we have all these kind of false starts, if you like, or potential false starts for the working class. And what I think we need is primarily, first of all, some sort of a great success, keeping the far right out, although that success may be very temporary. We had left-wing parties, actually left-wing organisations and left-wing parties working together. And I think that's probably the template that we need, because I seriously fear for our civil liberties under Starmer. I believe he's a completely authoritarian character. The way he's dealt with opponents in the party has been indicative of that, instructive of that. I think we're going to have a crackdown on civil liberties. And for the first time in my life, I didn't celebrate a Labour government. You know, we understand as Marxists and socialists that even people, working class people, voting for the Labour Party is a movement of a class, and it creates expectations. I don't think this was the case this time. I think that it was just they were browbeaten by the Tories, and they just wanted to change, and they weren't really expecting anything. I even remember when Blair got elected, there was some sort of sense of expectation. That didn't happen this time. So I think it's very, very, it's a very scary situation. And for the first time in my life as well, I actually welcomed the amount of Liberal Democrats that were elected, simply for the fact that there's a wing of that party who are quite libertarian, who do believe in protecting civil liberties. And I think they will be the main opposition, or the organised opposition within Parliament, to what Starmer's trying to do. So what brings us back to what we do, and as partisans of the working class from different organisations. And I think the first thing is that we need to work together. I think it's going to be absolutely counterproductive in the long run if we all line up between our behind whichever self-declared party leader, Galloway or Corbyn, or it looks like Corbyn now is only interested in staying in the Labour Party or getting back into the Labour Party. I don't think he's even making any moves, any credible moves towards creating a party, which leaves Feinstein. So the probability is it's going to be some sort of beauty contest between Feinstein and George Galloway. And I think that's incredibly bad. It's the wrong way to go about things. I do hope we can work together with other organisations. I do hope that in a very putative way that we did down in Newham, we had hustings, and we had that decided to actually avoid standing against each other, which was the start. We've also got people who are playing the most terrible politics of ethnicity and identity down here, and they are appealing to sections of the community, and that will have a reaction in other sections of the community. We will go down if we're not lucky, we'll go down the BJP road, that communal politics that are happening in India and elsewhere. So this is a bleak assessment. I understand it's a bleak assessment, but I think it's an honest assessment. And I think the only thing we can do is sort of painstakingly try to work together locally, regionally and nationally where possible, and build a party of the working class out of that. I don't believe one can be magicked into existence. I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take working together in campaigns and fighting battles together, fighting the everyday needs of the workers. I mean, we've got to get people council houses. We've got to get people decent jobs. We've got to get all the needs of the workers. You know, Palestine's a massive issue, but it's not the issue that is motivating people in Stratford that 65% of them didn't turn out. You know, that is not the issue for them. And we have to fight for those workers, be they from Eastern Europe or Ireland or Jamaica, the Windrush generation that has been completely abandoned in a lot of instances. We've got to offer them an alternative as well. So Palestine is very important, but we have to also give back the domestic policies, because people will not fight solely on the Palestinian issue. So that's it. That's the task I think that we've got, is the painstakingly get round, argue out locally, regionally and nationally, and get together in some sort of popular front and hope that we can form a political party that will represent the working class, that's made up of the working class, that is led by the working class. And with that, I think I hope I haven't over only 7 minutes, Pam, so I'll leave it there.
No, well, that's bang on time, Steve. Thanks very much. And we're going to have a better introduction to the purpose of this meeting, which is what do we do? What do we do about all these splits in the left? How do we get people together? How do we form a new mass working class party based on the trade unions, the grassroots, and not a bunch of careerists, which is what it's been so far. So, we're hoping in the course of this meeting that people will be inspired to actually come and join us. And we're hoping to set up some sort of steering committee to try and set this party up. But Steve has actually got it in on. That was an excellent introduction. I'm sure everybody knows that Steve could
yeah. You don't.
Could you mute, please, if you've not been asked to speak? Sorry, I can't see who it is at the moment. I'm sure everybody knows Steve is the previous Assistant General Secretary of RMT. I meant to say that at the beginning, Steve, but I'm sure we all know this anyway. Well, thank you very much for your contribution. That is absolutely excellent. So our next speaker is not a speaker. Ian Hodson, who needs no introduction, who is the president of the National Bakers Union, has sent us, as he's not able to attend the meeting, unfortunately, has sent us a video. So I'm going to pass us over to Matthew, who is going to attempt to run it for us. We've got no sound. Shall we move on to the next speaker while you sort this out, Matthew? Or will you be able to sort it out? Right, Matthew, if you can't sort it out quickly, I suggest we then take the next speaker and come back to this. Is this it coming up? Right. Matthew, are we moving on to the next speaker now? We'll see if we can sort that out.
It's me muting myself. Do you want me to do it just now?
Yes, do it now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Just sort this out.
We did see him, but we couldn't briefly, but we couldn't hear him.
No, do the next speaker.
Okay. Right, we'll try and sort that out in a minute. So our third speaker, Felicity, are you ready? Felicity Dowling is going to speak to us next. Felicity was probably well known as a Liverpool councillor of the 1980s. She's one of the Liverpool 47 who set a people's budget, which got them into a lot of trouble with the government, and Felicity made a lot of personal sacrifices to support this thing. So she's also very active in the Liverpool Women's Hospital campaign and has campaigned for women's equality for decades. So Felicity, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see
you. Let me see. Oh, can you see me now?
No, but we can hear you, which is the...
Okay, I'll just go. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. Okay, I'm Felicity Dowling. I'm the principal speaker from Left Unity. I'm a surcharge Liverpool councillor from the 1980s. And incidentally, looking up some things today for this, I saw that at the moment, the average number of council houses built is roughly 1,000 a year. And we built 6,000 in 3 years. That's us, just the one council. And those council houses are still there. Yeah, I'm an NHS campaigner, and God help the NHS with Wes Streeting in charge. Although it does look like he's come to some sort of an agreement with the junior doctors, which is good. I'm a trade unionist and an internationalist, an eco-socialist and a feminist. So the Tories have just been battered, and that's excellent. Every harm they've done us, they deserved every bit of the battering they got. And that was reflected in the mood. In Merseyside, there's not a single Tory MP left. But the Labour vote fell. It didn't rise, it fell. The combined right nationally got more votes than Labour, and they're going to regroup stronger as Starmer makes a mess. And there's now going to be an organised right in the Commons, absolute swines actually directly in the Commons, and organised as such, not hidden. But France has just shown us that when the fascists come knocking, it's not the centre that defeats them, it's organising the left and the working class to do so. The UK election was a strange election at a time of visible disquiet among swathes of people. There was no enthusiasm for Starmer except as a way to kick out the Tories. The turnout was the lowest since the universal franchise. And I mean, that's quite shocking. It's the lowest since everybody had a vote. The SNP was damaged, and whatever you think of the SNP, they're better than Labour. Sinn Féin won in Northern Ireland, which changes the possibilities for the future in Ireland. The smaller parties and independents won far more than was expected, not just the few that actually won, and congratulations to every one of them that did, but the number of people who came second, the people like Liam Mohammed, who got a fantastic campaign, and 500 votes, and we wouldn't have had Streeting in running the NHS. And Jeremy Corbyn won his seat magnificently. I mean, it was a magnificent achievement to win that seat in the manner that he won it. And to have 1,000 campaigners out for him is also an indication of the way he was seen. And when we look back on that, we've got to remember that in the last election, in 2019, the vote of young people for Corbyn was absolutely massive. And the vote of young women, especially, about 60% of young women aged from 18 to 24 voted for Corbyn. And the figures were huge. And all the indications are that the group have not changed their ideas and their votes. It was 65% of young women aged 18 to 24 voted for Corbyn. And then, 45% of women aged 25 to 49. And those votes were enormous. And the enthusiasm for Corbyn was something we do have to try and build and emulate. And I wouldn't share Steve's opinion. I share Steve's opinion that, yes, we do not want something run as, a fan club. We're not interested in a party that's a fan club. We're interested in a party that's deep in the working class, where it represents the issues that come up in the community. It represents the struggles that are going on in the trade union movement. It represents the struggles of oppressed groups for their rights. It represents internationalism, and it represents the struggle for peace and against nuclear war. It represents the demands of eco-socialism. But it's got to be deep in the class and deeply organised in the communities. We're 39 weeks and 3 days since the war in Gaza started, 2.5 years into the escalating war in Ukraine. We're deep into climate crisis with huge destruction of the ecosystem, from the insect crisis to heat waves, wildfires and floods, and less than a week from the EU, the general election in the UK, and a few days from the momentous general election in France, and mere weeks from the European Parliament election, which showed such support for the far right in Europe, again with a low poll, and a daunting prospect for politics in the United States. So internationally, we face huge problems. In a typical classroom in Britain at the moment, 30% of the children will be living in real poverty. I mean, that, you know, I was a teacher. You know, you're thinking that's 10 kids in your classroom, or more now. The size of classrooms are going up. Just about every public service is broken. Housing's in multiple crises. People are sleeping rough in shop doorways, and that's commonplace. And remember, they got everyone in during the pandemic. They could have everyone in now. It's a choice they have that our people sleep in the doorways. Peace is a huge problem with US weapons bombing Russia. And that's something that's happened in the last month or so. And we have a venal press and media. Our education system leaves many children with no knowledge of how change has been won in the past, no social and economic history. Interestingly, one of my grandchildren was telling me that where she goes to school, that the majority of the kids in the class were talking up reform, and the history teachers decided they had to shift the curriculum to make sure everyone, because after year 9, most people don't do history, that everyone in year 9 had to have done the Holocaust before the end of term. So they've shifted the curriculum to teach the Holocaust. And good on those teachers for doing so. But there are points of, you know, there's lots of points of optimism. You know, for France, I think all of us were cheering for France. And again, the side story that when people were canvassing for Corbyn in Islington, they bumped into people who were canvassing for the French general election from France Insoumise. There's pictures, you know, in some of the left papers of the two sets of canvassers together. There's a huge French vote in London. It's a big city in terms of the number of people who can vote in the French election. Okay.
Right, sorry, you finished?
Well, I've got other things to say, but I didn't time it very well. Can I just say that if we're going to, I'll finish on saying,
okay,
if we're going to build something, we've got to do it being open to discuss with other people and not forcing issues to come to a conclusion immediately. We do have to take into account all of the campaigns as well as the electoral issues. And when we are campaigning, we've got to canvass, and we've got to have left primaries to decide who it is that should represent that constituency, so that people have a say. People are built into that idea of this is ours. And just in Liverpool, you know, I can give you the votes, you know, I can put something in the chat about the votes in Liverpool, but certainly canvassing for Sam Gorst or campaigning for Sam Gorst, he's a young man, and the support and sympathy for him in the population was something like what we'd seen in Corbyn's elections. So, yeah, and he'll be there, he'll keep on working, and that's important. So I'll leave it at that and hopefully come back in on the discussion.
That's great. Thanks very much, Felicity. So moving on now to our third speaker is Dave Hill. Dave Hill has been instrumental in setting up this meeting. He has, I'll try to introduce him properly. Just a minute, right. He's got a very long history. He's a veteran socialist. He's stood in 2 elections. He's been a Labour group leader. He's been a shop steward and regional union chair in NATFHE. Recently was involved in the campaign to try and get Tanushka Mara, a pro-Gaza candidate, elected in Brighton, I think. So over to you, Dave.
Can you hear me, comrades? Can you put your fingers up if you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Because I've just touched a button on my computer, which has completely destroyed my sound. So you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Oh, dear.
But being a deaf person, I can partly lip read, and I've got the captions on.
Okay.
So
you've had your 7 minutes.
Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for that introduction, Pam. Okay, I've got a clock beside me, so I shall stop after about 50 minutes, 7 minutes. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. I want to talk about 2 or 3 different things. I want to talk about the United Front, in fact, But I want to start off by talking about the united front we built in the local campaign in Hove, where we had a campaign. We got one of the best results in the country. We got 5.9% in an area with a very small Muslim population. That's one of the top left, socialist, anti-austerity, pro-Palestine, openly socialist campaigns. We did well. We've done some of the things that comrades have talked about. We did have a left hustings. You know, we got in touch with about 20 different WhatsApp groups. We had 165 people turn up, and they selected, it happened to be lucky, we selected somebody who was not only a socialist, but also a good candidate. And we ran a full campaign. We spent the maximum, and we had about 200 people, which is pretty phenomenal. Now, what I want to focus on is who were they? Who are we? Because we're continuing. Okay, so we had a number of people from the small parties. We had people from most of the small parties: Socialist Workers' Party, Socialist Party, Socialist Alternative, Communist Party of Britain, Fourth International. We had a number of those people with experience in organising and also in elections. The biggest group, I guess, other than the youth, other than the young, the biggest group was people who've been expelled from or actually left the Labour Party. Felicity talked about she gave statistics about the number of young people, and it was incredible. The vibe, the buzz, the social media awareness, the youthfulness, the vibrancy of the campaign. Young Anglos, but also a lot of people, I don't want to exaggerate, but people from the minority ethnic groups. Now, I want to make a crucial point here. It was not only those groups, we also had support from the Trades Council. The Trades Council had about 15 candidates in Brighton and Hove to choose from, and the one they selected to choose after a hustings at the Trades Council was our candidate, who was called Tanushka Marar. So how did we all do? How did the other parties do? How did the left, perennially split? But, you know, I read Gramsci sometimes, not usually before I'm going to bed, but I sometimes read Gramsci. And his phrase, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. I'm an optimist. It's a personality defect. I'm a perennial optimist. And I see the possibility, if we play a part in it, we 60, 70 people here, and trades councils and trade unions and community organisations, I do foresee the possibility of the left coming together more than in the past. Most of us here have been through Socialist Alliance, Respect, Tusk. I fought a number of elections for Tusk as well as for the Labour Party. But I do think it's so important, and so does everyone at this meeting, I guess, that we do come together. And that we, to pick up a point that both other speakers have made, that we do come together, not as a fan club, not as a fan club of Galloway or Corbyn or Feinstein or et cetera, et cetera. The working class must throw up its own leaders, and it must develop its own programme. What I want to, I don't know how long I've been going, but I want to talk a bit about the United Front, which is even more necessary in view of the fact that actually, and I'm sure most people know this, that the right got a higher vote, not just in France, which is unremarked upon. They got a lot more votes than the Popular Front and the centrists separately. But in England, the right-wing parties got 38% of the vote. That's Conservatives and Reform. Labour only got 34%. And all of us here are going to say no enthusiasm for Starmer. And it's quite right. I've fought in 13 elections as a candidate, parliamentary, council, etc., etc. Never have I seen a result greeted with such, what's the word? The noun for dismal, dismality, lack of enthusiasm, lack of hope. shrug of the shoulders. And the far right, although some comrades will say they're not a threat, they are a threat. And who are the people they come for? First, it's not the ethnic minorities, it's not the Jews, it's not the Muslims, it's the working class, the trade unions and the working class organisations. You can look at Hitler, you can look at Mussolini, you can look at Milei in Argentina, Bolsonaro, blah, blah, blah. The first people they kill, the first people they appropriate, the first people they silence are the representatives of the working class. And it's not enough to say, but they haven't got a street army. Okay, they've only got a tiny street army at the minute with Tommy Robinson and the EDL, etc., etc. But they can fund street armies. So we have to really be aware. And that's another reason to bring the left together. So I want to end up, if I've got time, have I got a couple of minutes left? Right. I want to end up on stuff about the United Front. I happen to be hugely anti-sectarian. It's what I've spent the last few decades trying to bring in my own minuscule way, my own ant-like way, trying to bring the left together, get us all to work together, which we did in the campaign in Hove, and which other campaigns throughout the country have done to get us together. Now, the United Front is a way we know from Trotsky, and I happen to be a revolutionary Marxist, a Trotskyist, an anti-capitalist. I want to see capitalism replaced, not just managed a bit more pleasantly. I want to see it replaced with socialism and communism as described by Marx in Grundrisse and German ideology, etc., etc. But the United Front is a way of bringing us Marxists, those of us who are here, that us Marxists, together with other sections of the working class, who we must not dismiss, but working in a united front with them without liquidating ourselves, without indulging in liquidationism, without without engaging in tailism, tailing along the most moderate demands. We keep our own organisations, we keep our own principles, but we work in that milieu, trying to bring different groups, reformist groups and revolutionary groups together. So we don't liquidate, we don't tail end, we have contestation, we have argument, debate, and you know, we can see it in the campaign in Brighton, which is continuing, as I say. We see the people's eyes being opened. They've never before heard words like I don't know, like revolution or like anti-capitalism. And I think, Pam, I think you are wonderful. But I disagree with one slight thing you said. You said we all know this, we all know Felicity, we all know Ian Hodson. We don't. I mean, we do. But I would say that of the 200 people involved in the campaign in Hove, 180 had never heard of the other speakers on this programme or of me. I live here. So we have to be open. We have to be open and embrace these without liquidating ourselves and tail ending. So I end up with a plea for us to work with other groups. And my last sentence, and those other groups must include the trades councils and the trade unions, because the trade unions and the trades councils, they are the organisations, the organised units of the working class. Most of the other groups are not yet organised. So that's why I'm speaking on behalf of the campaign for a mass workers' party. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks very much for that.
I can't hear a word, but I can read it.
Can you lip read? Can you lip read what I'm saying? Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction. Right. So we've still got Ian Hodson to go. I'm wondering if Matthew will be able to show his introduction now.
On Thursday, we saw
out of touch government, a Tory party that only represented the. We saw the election of a Labour with a huge majority, maybe not the votes, but certainly the MPs.
It's not working.
The Tory policies during the election it intended to do, or with the huge mandate that it now has, it actually goes further.
It's a bit hard to swallow this.
It needs reform. They often say that the best Labour government are the ones of Attlee. Attlee can only dream of the position that Starmer found himself into. In contrast, what the Attlee government did, what this current Labour Party is suggesting, with a financial situation far worse than what the Labour Party created a country after that Second World War back in every community and gave people hope. It built council houses, created a welfare state, it created a national health service, and it brought us full employment with jobs that paid a decent wage. Starmer finds himself in a position where he's able to mirror that government, to mirror a government that invested in its people and not in its donors. And we need to start by rebuilding our council houses. Because security for all of us starts with a safe, decent home to live in. We need to reinvest in our healthcare system, and that means taking private health out of the NHS and restoring it to its foundation.
Matthew, I'm wondering if it's worth continuing this because I think people are having trouble hearing.
And that means accessible for all those.
Sounds going in and out. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It means a welcoming place, whether you're an asylum seeker or somebody that was born here. It doesn't judge. It just helps you to get well again. It improves lives and it changes all of our opportunities by improving our health. We need to see a new deal for workers, one that recognises that 0 hours contracts no longer play a place in a workforce if we have aspirations for raising all of our opportunities. The end of the ability to fire and rehire to force workers to accept the terms and conditions and replace them if they won't accept what the bosses demand. And that means a new deal for workers, not one that's acceptable to the bosses, but one that's accepted by the workers and the people and the citizens that work for the United Kingdom. We need to build a society that feels it's represented and feels it has a future. Otherwise, what we will witness in this country is what we're just witnessing over in Europe, and we saw in France, the rise of the far right. We should be under no illusion. It's the centrist politics of Macron and others across Europe that have enabled and emboldened the far right to be able to make the power gains that they have. And we should all be worried about them. It's never been a migrant that's made your life hard. It's always been political decisions that have caused the hardship we all face in our community. And that's why it's really important that we organise and we prepare to more. Because if we don't, then that gap will be filled by barge and train. Continue to use migrants as an excuse for the difficulties we face. Poverty is politically made. Inequality is politically driven. And our duty is to highlight where politicians fail, to work with and build in our communities so that they understand that there is an opportunity for a different way. Melicom got elected on a platform of not increasing the hardship of working people.
Matthew, my suggestion is because of the sound, we stop this now. Because I think we've got the gist. I'm sorry about that, comrades. What I'm going to suggest we do, we will be putting them. Could everybody mute, please? We will be putting the meeting online, and I'll make sure that that really excellent speech is posted with the meeting, so you won't miss out altogether. But I think we've certainly got the gist of it, and given the difficulty of hearing what's being said, I think it's important we move on to the discussion now. So I hope everybody will be all right with that. So I'm going to throw the meeting open to discussion now. So I'm hoping that we will be looking at what are we going to do, what's the way forward, how are we going to form a new mass working party and overcome the divisions on the left. So I ask if you want to speak, if you could put your electronic hand up, and I will take the comrades in turn. And if we could keep our remarks to about 5 minutes each, please, to give lots of people a chance to say something. So who would like to come in? I'm going to invite Roger Silverman to sum up at the end of the discussion, but we obviously need to have the discussion first. Anybody want to ask any questions or disagreements? Or right, we've got a speaker. Salvinda, would you like to come in, unmute and come in, please? Yeah, you need to unmute yourself. Yeah, we
unmuted. Yeah, my name is Salvinda Devan. I've been involved with the Indian Work Association group, as well as stood the candidate in the Ealing South area as a council election, independent, and a parliamentary election, also in Australia in the Broad Alliance. Now, I just want to share some experience. What happened in Australia is the same thing, the topic we're discussing, that the left was very much divided, and there was a great need to get together. And what we did was similar to what Dave Hill was saying, a great need to build the United Front. And in order to start building the United Front, we had a mass meeting in which we all came up with ideas that what is a program around which we're going to unite. You'd be surprised why that meeting happened. There was a big conflict between two left-wing organizations, even a physical conflict, and we were disgusted by that, which serves capitalism. So it was very important that we had a 3-day conference. The first thing we said is, okay, we stop fighting with each other. We want to unite on political unity. You see, there's ideological differences and political unity. We may come from different ideological backgrounds. Somebody may be Marxist-Leninist, somebody may be Vladimir Trotsky, but that's not the issue. The issue is we represent the working class interest. And what was the program that we unite the working class? It was against war, it's against privatization, against racism, because the Iraq war was quite going on at the time. And so we spent first discussing what is a program around which we want to build the United Front. And then Pauline Hanson was coming with all the right-wing ideas. The right-wing is emerging, Pauline Hanson, like you have the Reform Party here. And out of that, what we said is, okay, we're going to confront that. There's going to be elections. And how do we pick up a candidate who will actually take on Pauline Hanson? So out of that program, first of all, we formed a broad program against racism, against war, and then we allowed everybody to come up with who will actually stand up for that program, who will fight for that program, which we all made up ourselves together collectively. And a lot of organizations put forward their candidates, myself included, and also Jenny Monroe, who was a leading international human rights activist. And after the candidates, we came to a selection process. Here's a list of candidates who want to fight. Now let's have democratically elect out of that list who's the most suitable candidates. And it emerged. I'm not flattering myself. Myself was one and Jenny Monroe was the other. You can check it out under the Broad Alliance, which is the unifying United Front. We emerged as a result of those efforts. And then the whole left, as Dave Hill said, put their weight behind those two candidates. And we did pretty well because we had a very short time. So what Dave Hill was saying was basically United Front, embracing all the left-wing organizations, embracing the trade unions, embracing the migrant communities around a program. And just as on May Day, we got a program, we celebrate May Day. It doesn't have to be just May Day, it could be an ongoing effort to unite around our working class issue, but it has to be led by working class politics. And so we took on Pauline Hanson. We made big headways. All I want to say is that what Dave Hill just said and other comrades are saying, it's very, very important we build the United Front. Otherwise, as some speakers mentioned, they're going to go for the trade unions, they're going to go for the communists, they're going to go for the left wing and then wipe everybody out. So it's very critical, very important work all our comrades are doing here. And all I want to say is express my full solidarity from the Indian Workers on GB for your efforts, as well as we have a small beginning, like the British Work Association. The idea is not to form a party with the British, we're not saying British Work Association is a party, but it shares the same sort of aspirations you have to build the United Front, which is very much needed. So around the program, politics comes first. And lastly, I finished, we achieved so much in that short time, even in the it's called, it's near Sydney University, another university, we had a joint room of all the left wing where we had joint printing facilities, joint discussions, where we could air our ideological differences. But whenever we fought out campaigns or rallies, we were one united force. So that's what I want to share with you. Let's do that, and congratulations to all the efforts. And as Steve already mentioned, sometimes we do put cart before the horse. We need to work on the issues, build a program, build the United Front through those efforts, and out of that will emerge the Workers' Party, rather than declaring, and I worked with Respect, I was one of the leading people there as well. When Respect was formed, we made big headway, and there was a split, unfortunately, between two groups, and we didn't like that split, it weakened our efforts. So sometimes necessary to build from the grassroots, the working class movement, and out of that, workers' democracy, let people decide the program, let the membership decide who the leading figure should be in that way. So workers' democracy instead of bourgeois democracy.
Thanks very much, Salvin, and thanks for joining us this evening. Right, we'll move on to John Dunn.
Very much for the opportunity.
Yes, very good to have you here. So we'll move on to John Dunn. Can everybody else start putting their hands up, please, and ask some questions or say something?
We couldn't hear Ian Hodson, who's a first-class socialist and great leader of his trade union. And I think so far the only one who's come anywhere near has been Steve Hedley. Because I'm sick of this term, unify the left, unify the left. I don't know what the left is anymore. Is it the grooming cult of what was once socialist appeal, now the revolutionary, whoever they are? Is it the various Trotskyist death cults, as I refer to them? Is it the likes of Novara Media and these well-meaning middle classes that Steve talked about? I've got nothing in common with these people, nothing in common whatsoever. People, you know, especially the so-called left groups who only want to know working class activists when they can sell them a paper, get them to sign a petition, get a donation for the fighting fund, etc., etc. And, you know, these people, I spend a lot of time, I'm very lucky, talking to real people outside of any bubble. And I think that the people that something will be built from were the people who never bothered to vote, the people who thought a plague on all your houses, the people who were way in front of us and who I think are ready for an alternative. And I don't even like the phrase right wing anymore, because people, and you know, those of us, I supported the Brexit referendum result. I'm a right winger apparently for that, because the EU, according to many of our middle class friends, is this great socialist institution. So I'm not interested at this stage in forming a party. I'm not interested. I think we need the movement strengthening. It's only just getting up off its knees after 40 years. Very few trade unions are fighting back. Perhaps Unite and ASLEF are the two exceptions, and we most definitely don't want a messiah. You know, the whole idea that if Corbyn did this and if Corbyn did that, we could start singing "Oh Jeremy Corbyn" again, and life would be rosy. So I think we have to show a bit of patience, and where the movement is active, be it in a community organisation, be it a tenants organisation, a trade union action, that's the unity we build, not be pulling all these myriad of evangelistic I can't say it, vanguard groups who actually think the working class is composed of layers, and if you get this advanced layer, then things trickle down. It's nonsense. I have unlearned just about everything I've learned in this in such groups, and I think I'm a better class fighter and a better understander of our class than I was when I was involved. So sorry if it seems a bit negative, but stop looking in the wrong direction. Stop chasing on the tails of these has-beens who never were, and let's build the movement first.
Okay, thanks, John. I think that pretty much illustrates, you know, the purpose of this meeting is to answer John's question: is how do we create a working class movement with chosen leaders and not messiahs? I can't see any other hands up at the moment. Would anybody? They're going up now. Darren Gulpin, please. You are still muted. Yeah, we can't hear you, Darren.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Yeah.
Magic. Thank you. Hello. So for those of you, if you don't know me, I'm Darren Galpin, and I'm an active socialist on the Isle of Wight. And I think somebody commented about not wanting, you know, saying we shouldn't be on the tail of movements, we shouldn't tail movements. But I think some of the time you have to. You know, certainly at present, you know, we don't have a mass socialist party. I mean, I went along to the local ferry user group protest on Saturday. It was their second protest of 3 scheduled for this summer. The newly elected Labour MP, who, you know, as Labour candidates go, is not a bad guy, was there. The Green candidate was there, again, quite well, generally sort of respected across the broader left spectrum on the island. And, you know, when you go there, you know, I was talking to people about public ownership of the ferries. I think most of the people there, like, agree with it, but, you know, you're not in a position at the moment to say, well, we should abandon the Labour Party. We should, you know, the Green Party are kind of false prophets. They're just liberals, and that we should have a new party, and, you know, that with a radical socialist program, because people won't really want to listen to that at present. I think we're still, a lot of the time, it is intervening. It is about actually kind of getting to know people and listening as well. I think, you know, you've got to kind of, you know, I think in the long term, yeah, you know, you've got to kind of go and, you know, find those people who see, you know, like within those campaigns, find those people who are more keen to, you know, get involved with something that's more joined up and see the need for a new party. And I talked to one of the, like with the ferry campaign, you know, talked to the principal organizer about it. But, you know, like, a lot of the time you're just dealing with human beings. I think, you know, she's an individual who's kind of primarily concerned with the ferry. She's ex-Labour, you know, she's interested in some of the other campaigns, you know, like she's been along to the the annual the weekly Gaza gathering that we do in the town square. But like I think still a lot of the time there is a softly approach, and it may well be the case that we have to kind of, I agree with the assessment about saviour figures, but it may well be the case that it is someone like I don't think necessarily a Corbyn, because I think he will probably he still wants to work within the Labour Party system, but I think it may well be, it might well be like an individual figure emerges. Maybe Mick Lynch will bring the RMT back into sort of funding political parties and funding election campaigns as they did with Tusk, but with more kind of successful, viable candidates. And people may see Mick Lynch as the saviour, and that's what we have to do. I think although I think it's important to kind of have that analysis and perspective and understand what we want. And I kind of agree very much with a lot of those kind of assessments that have been made. I think we still have to be quite flexible and think for ourselves. I think that's probably what separates us. I think myself, I was in the Socialist Party. A lot of other people here have come from some of the Trotskyist organisations, and I think what kind of marks us out as independent socialists, like the previous contributor said, like we've learned to kind of see things differently and kind of think for ourselves more, rather than kind of regurgitate a set of perspectives from whichever kind of small Marxist group we belong to. I'll leave it there. Thank you, comrades.
Right, thanks very much, Darren. Very neatly in 5 minutes. We can move on to Howard now, please. Howard, you need to. We can't seem to. Are you speaking? We can't seem to hear you. Oh dear.
Pam, you've asked me to lower my hand. Colin McGowan.
Yeah, I've just asked Howard to speak, but we can't actually hear him. I think he's speaking. Howard, you might need to leave the meeting and come in to get your sound back. If you do, I'll bring you straight in. Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I'll invite Colin McGowan to speak now while we're waiting for Howard. Colin, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, hi. And thank you for letting me speak. Listening to Selvinda and John, they're absolutely spot on with, where John was saying about we need to get everything sort of laid out first before we start running ahead. And Selvinda was absolutely right. We need, if we do land up getting a decent workers' party, we need some where it's properly elected and not dictated to. And I totally agree with that. I think looking through the people that are here, one of the things I feel strongly about is that we need to get the younger element on board, because at the end of it all, we're all some of us is quite old, and I'll put my hand up to it, you see. And the reality is, we're trying to work things as all unions and such like should do for the people coming behind us, to make sure it's all set perfectly for them. And at the moment, our political system isn't fit for purpose. You've got the Tories, you've got Labour and Lib Dems. They're all from the same pot now. And the worrying thing for me with Starmer being in there is, whereas there's a few people I know on here who have demonstrated against the onslaught in Gaza and Palestine, and I can safely say I feel that Starmer will make that into a hate speech and ban people from having a voice, and that worries me. Because people have been thrown out of the Labour Party for pro-Palestinian support, I know I'm one of them, and I just don't trust the man. Anyway, whatever we decide this evening, I'm more than happy to follow it along and make sure that we can get something which is coherent and something we can build on, like everybody's saying. So I'll shut up now and let somebody else have a word in.
Okay, thanks, Colin. I mean, we are trying to sort of get a kind of a bit of a committee together that will sort of kick these things off. So please put your name down for it if you'd like to be involved. Right, Howard's back with us. Howard, do you want to have another try, Howard G? Let's have another go, see if you can unmute yourself. Right. Oh, I'm really sorry, but we still can't hear you. Oh, sorry. We'll have to move on to the next speaker. Jason. Okay, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm just the usual unmuting problem. But yeah, well, hello, comrades. Jason Toynbee here. I'm down in Brighton with Dave Hill. Was involved with Dave in the campaign for Tanushka Mara, the independent left candidate in this city. And just a couple of things, really. First of all, interest bearing on what Dave was saying about sectarianism. Other comrades have said the same thing. I'm an ex-member of Socialist Alternative. I left, actually, the week before the election, partly because of my involvement in the campaign in the city for Tanushka Mara, but also just because, you know, I've just had 20 years of becoming increasingly pissed off with democratic centralism, in other words, centralism. And so for me, this has been an incredibly liberating experience getting involved in this campaign. And now coming on to this meeting, it feels very good and very open. But I note that there are really big issues, and comrades have touched on quite a few of these. But I want to bring up one which I think maybe hasn't quite been discussed so much yet, which is to do with the nature of the coalitions we're getting involved in with an independent campaign. And I'm sure it varies a lot around the country. It'll be different in different towns and cities. But in Hove, the constituency where we had our independent campaign, we have and Dave characterised that, I think, very well in terms of the variety of constituencies that were involved in that campaign. But I'd say that what's interesting, having been involved in a Trotskyist organisation for years, is I was shocked by the degree of political naivety and the range of political views. And of course, you know, I've gone from one extreme to the other, if you like, very quickly over the course of a few days, coming across this incredible range. Now, that's a good thing. Of course, it's a good thing, because it means that we have the possibility of building, precisely because we're open. And I think Felicity's points about the need for openness and the need for continuing debate really come to the fore here. In our case, we're going to need to work with and work through a whole bunch of different political notions, ranging from what seems to me to be not exactly anarchistic, but certainly strongly decentralist. There's a strong tendency in Brighton and Hove to what I'd call localism. You know, a great deal of experience and expertise around local issues, but nevertheless, a kind of reluctance, really, to think too clearly about getting involved in a national campaign, getting involved in a national organisation like this one, a campaign for a new mass workers' party. That seems to be something which is not naturally coming to people. And it isn't so much an issue of sectarianism. I don't think people think that their proponents of that argument are sectarian necessarily, so much as proposing something which is simply unworkable. There's a kind of skepticism about the possibility of a national party, a national organisation, not coming from, as I say, the experience of the old left, the experience of sectarianism and absurd competition between, you know, the narcissism of small differences, as somebody called it recently, but because they just don't have any faith in big politics, if you like. So that's where I think we've got a challenge, certainly in our area. It's to build political consciousness without being patronising. We've got a lot to learn from young people, but it's that process of bringing these constituencies together around a class politics, which can also speak to oppression and issues of today. Obviously, climate change being right at the front there. Thanks, comrades.
Thanks, Jason. If we can move on to Jeff Taylor, please.
Hello, comrades. I'm Oxford-based. I came into active politics relatively recently with Corbyn, or with the Corbyn project, should I say, which I stuck with for the time he was there and tried afterwards to stay and give Starmer the benefit of the doubt. And I did as much as I could to help the Labour project under Corbyn and that kind of democratic socialist project. And I went up and campaigned 3 times for Corbyn in Islington, and I'm very happy that he won. But since then, I've left the Labour Party. I've been in a couple of revolutionary Marxist organisations, and I am one of those people who stands and sells newspapers. But I'm very happy with Dave Hill from Brighton's take on things, and his advocation of the united front. And I think this is a terrific thing. And I feel that with the Palestine Solidarity campaign here in Oxford, that has also worked brilliantly well to bring together different small parties, revolutionary parties, and also other people in a united front. And I feel that united front is absolutely necessary. And especially now that Starmer's in, there's not much hope of anything great from that quarter. But also in is the far right. We've got Nigel Farage with 5 seats now, and this is extremely worrying. We've been able, through United Front activities over a number of decades, we've in Britain been able to keep the far right pretty much down. Not me personally, but we have kept them down, and so this is new. And in Europe now, with the rise of the far right in France and in other countries, the thought of Donald Trump very likely coming back, we have got to work together to combat the racists, the far right, and Farage. The Tories are part of that project, and the Starmer's Labour also tends towards that project with racism, xenophobia against asylum seekers and so on. And I would say, whatever happens with this project for a mass party, there's one thing we can all do on the 27th of July. The 27th of July, Tommy Robinson has called again for his thugs to come out to Trafalgar Square, and he was able to mobilise 5,000 on the 1st of June. This Saturday, 27th of July, if we can mobilise and stand up to them, we keep them off the streets. And whatever we're able to do as well, parliamentarily, at least we'll keep them off the streets. And this is the 27th of July. If you go to standuptoracism.org.uk, you can find out if there's any local transport going. And this is supported by so many unions, the NEU, PCS, Unison, Unite, RMT, Fire Brigades Union, ASLEV, all the teachers' unions, Jewish Socialist Group, Corbyn's Peace for Justice, Stop the War Coalition, and others. This is something we can do immediately on 27th of July. Get your trade unionist friends out, get your workplace friends out, get everybody out on the streets to London to stand up to Tommy Robinson. If he gets 5,000 out, we need to get 10,000. We need to get 100,000 out and show the people of Britain that we will not take this kind of racism. Thank you. I'll end there.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Kate?
Oh, I've done it, have I?
You've done it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm so relieved that I know some people here, because I just got this link to this meeting. I didn't know who'd organised it, so it felt quite scary. But I know you, Pam, and quite a few of the other people. So I really don't. I can't tell anyone how to organise this new party, but I just wanted to say that I was really uplifted by what happened with the independents in the election. Before then, I felt very, very bleak, and the media totally shut out, apart from Crispin Flintoff's programme, Not the Andrew Marr Show, which I always go to. There was nothing really covering these independents. They didn't exist, you know. But I knew about some of these people and I was following them. So I felt like I was part of something, even though I wasn't actually very well and I couldn't go and do anything. And I was really moved by Jodie McIntyre in Yardley, who almost defeated Jess Phillips. 700, there were 700 votes between them. And I saw how she attacked him. He's a Muslim man, but he doesn't make a thing of that. I think he's got cerebral palsy. He's got a very obvious disability. He looks like someone who has nothing, but he kind of has everything. And when he spoke, you knew that he included his whole community, and he spoke about his campaign and how everyone was involved. It was a kind of united front in Yardley with kids and grandmothers and all sorts of sections of the community. And that was just amazing. And she was trying to say that these Muslim men had attacked her as a woman and intimidated her. And he just made the point that as a person with a very obvious disability and also with a person of colour, he was subject to millions of really awful messages on social media, you know, but that's not the issue. We don't sort of compete to be a victim. You know, we're actually fighting for something better, which is anti-war, anti-racism, redistribution of resources, a voice for people, for Gaza. And I just found that so moving. And I thought it made me feel for the first time in actuality that there was a point for having a new party. Before it seemed like a theory to me. And I actually thought there are these brave people who've got fantastic ideas, and especially the people who are so disadvantaged and are really, I feel like the true working class in a way, you know, who are coming up from a place like Yardley and fighting back. And we need to get those people together and not lose that spirit. And I just wanted to, he said he was opening an office up and they were going to carry on that kind of work. And I think it's similar to what's been done in Newham. And I think that is the point that brings the working class together, when there are people who are prepared to fight with them and listen to them and actually feel like they belong. So that's what I just wanted to say. I was so filled with hope. Thanks.
Right, thanks very much, Kate. That's great. If we move on to Dominic now, please.
My hand.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yeah.
It's just to my mind that, you know, there's so much been discussed tonight. But I think the basic thing is we're not talking about going out and setting up a party, at least I'm not. You're talking about setting up a movement to build a party. And I think there's a difference. And the basic thrust I think that we've got to be into is explaining and being active at the same time that the fight is against capitalism. It's not about individual issues. The individual issues are something we fight against. But we've got to explain that it's capitalism that caused these problems. And the whole thrust of capitalism at the moment is a really massive attack on the working class. And most of the trade union and labour leaders don't even mention it. You know, it's almost a secret. It's this issue, that issue, the other issue. But why these issues? Like Conrad was talking about the ferry. The reason the ferry will be challenged, I don't know any other circumstances, is because it's not making profit or enough profit for the capitalists. That's the only reason that they cut down services and chop them off. or they've got a more profitable alternative that's not in the public interest. So I think when we're taking, we've got to raise the issue that capitalism is the root of all the problems facing mankind, never mind just the working class. If you look at everything within society, whether it's climate change, whether it's starvation, whether it's all the problems facing the working class, the migration of people because of the climate change and because of wars, creating wars in Africa and other places, supported by capitalists to get the assets out of that country, whether it be gold or oil or precious metals or what have you. Something that's there that they want to steal, basically. And that they're stealing the wages of the working class. They're paying the working class a pittance of the wealth that they produce. We've got to explain these things, as part of the problems faced by the working class and the fights that the working class are in. Because the one thing we've got, it's not masses of people, but we have got ideas and some understanding of what capitalism is about. And it's a question of explaining what capitalism is about and getting that into the class so that the class become an organisation within itself, a class within itself, not just fighting this campaign and that campaign, but fighting the whole capitalist system. It's a bit bitty, but I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Nora. You're right, Nora. Can you unmute yourself and make your contribution? See your mouth moving, so I can't hear anything. So we come back to you in a minute. Yeah, Nora, we can't hear you. Right, great.
Managed it. Sorry, I'm used to Microsoft Teams. Well, I'm Nora from South Yorkshire in Barnsley. I chose to live here 30 years ago when I was in a position to move and have choices, because it was the Socialist Republic. Yeah, I've found out different since I moved here. Ex-militant, ex-Labour Party, and I'm afraid ex-revolutionary, because I'm running out of time. I'm one of the oldies, and I wanted to have a revolution for my kids and grandkids, but all the left factions would just argue about who's in control. So I became the beginning of an anarchist. But I heard about what happened in Bolivia, how they got rid of political parties and the people did it themselves. And what I've heard tonight has been really encouraging, because political parties might get into power, but they're only interested in the party. And I'm afraid all the different factions that became factions after militant fell apart are the same. It's all about their paper, their fighting fund. You're perfectly right, John Dunn. You know what you're talking about. But in my work, I was involved in supporting patient and carer public voice in the NHS. And I learned from that when you get people with different ideas and you bring them together with a cause that they all care about, it can get round the differences. And a couple of people have said this sort of thing, and this is what we're aiming for. I think it's about accountability of elected members and within any structure. And it's about proper democracy, where everybody has a voice and everybody is listened to. And what I learned in the NHS is the first thing you do, and I know it's obvious, is ground rules. So if all the groups are going to come together, you have to have ground rules and insist that everybody keeps to them. And maybe in time people will build trust and start listening to each other and start working together without arguing all the time. I mean, I've been to Palestinian demos in Sheffield where you've had 4 or 5 tables, all selling newspapers, all with a little A4 sheet with their potted version about what's happening in Gaza, and none of them talking to each other. And it's just ridiculous. So I'm really pleased. I don't know how I got invited to this, but I'm really pleased, and I'd like to keep in touch. But I just think it's about building trust across the different groups, and stopping shouting at each other and start listening to each other, and remember why we're all involved. I don't know if that makes any sense.
That's great. Thank you very much, Nora. I mean, this is only the beginning, we hope, of many meetings. We will be contacting everybody who's come on the call, and we will be staying in touch with you. So just watch out, watch your inbox, basically. Thank you. Kieran.
Yes, good evening, comrades. My name's Kieran. I'm based in Northern Ireland. And I'd just like to make some general comments and then some specific comments about this place. I mean, this is a good meeting, and a sign of a good meeting is that it throws up more questions than it provides answers. And I think that's important because there are different opinions on this call in terms of the need for, you know, a revolutionary core, a revolutionary party, people who think as revolutionaries, those who think differently, how we actually come together, what does the United Front mean? But to me, one of the things we really do need to do is to look backwards. Because most of us here are of a certain age, and we all remember the Clause 4 moment, when Clause 4 was, you know, extracted from the Labour Party constitution under Blair. That's a long time ago, it's a generation ago. And unfortunately, we have signally failed to build a broader alternative to the left of Labour. It's 2024, we have failed to do it. The first past the post system defeats us. True, but it hasn't defeated the Green Party. They've just got 4 MPs elected. Imagine it's been 4 socialists or MPs to the left of Labour as a group who could work together in Parliament now, the difference that could make. And unfortunately, Reform have somehow broken through the ceiling provided by the first past the post system. And we have failed to do it, and we need to learn the lessons. And that does mean looking backwards and thinking about all of the different initiatives or experiments like the Socialist Labour Party, like Respect, like others, because there are lessons, both positive and negative, from each of those initiatives. And whilst a lot that happened in the election was positive, you know, every positive contained within it has potential negatives. And the election of the 4 independents on the Gaza issue, for example, as Steve talked about in the very first contribution, you know, there are dangers contained within that too, in terms of what that vote actually represents and where those MPs may go next. Say if the Gaza war comes to an end 6 months from now or a year from now, where will those MPs be? Where did the Respect councillors go ultimately? That, you know, they didn't stay in the broad left Labour fold. You know, they moved away, unfortunately, over time. So I think we just need to come back to it. But Pam's already covered that in her last comment, that this is just the beginning for the discussions. With regard to Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland, I was director of elections for a campaign in Fermanagh in South Tyrone, which is the largest constituency in Northern Ireland, one of the largest in these islands. There's only one constituency which is larger, rural, but with 2 towns, Enniskillen and Dungannon. And Dungannon in particular is an industrial town, a working class town. We used to do a candidate under the title of Cross Community Labour, and we did that purposely, because left candidates in the north, generally speaking, are assumed to be of one community or the other, unless you state that you're not of one community or the other. And we did use the word Labour in the title, despite the fact that Labour in certain ways is a contaminated word. We know the reasons why, Starmerism or Blairism. But in the north, Labour, for most working class people, represents something that is different from unionism and different from nationalism, and which unites working class people. So for us, it's an important word to use. The campaign, it's kind of similar to what's been described by the comrades in Brighton and other places, in the sense that it brought together activists from different traditions, activists who come from left republicanism, Workers' Party tradition, activists who would have been involved in the Communist Party in the past, particularly activists who joined the Labour Party during the Corbyn period and have now left the Labour Party, and activists who have come through the militant Socialist Party tradition, and others, campaigners on the ground, health service campaigns, trade unionists. We didn't have the official backing of the Trades Council. The Trades Council was mentioned, but the Trades Council activists, the bulk of them, the majority, in effect, supported the campaign. Now, it was a difficult campaign. It was a hard-fought battle between unionism and nationalism, between Sinn Féin and the Ulster Unionist Party for the seat. Sinn Féin won through. And just to comment on Felicity's point, Felicity made the point about the Sinn Féin success, in inverted commas, in the election being a positive, I think is what Felicity meant. It's not a positive. It's communal politics, it's sectarian politics, and it's no more positive than the DUP doing well in an election. If I thought it was positive, then we wouldn't have organised a campaign and stood against Sinn Féin. Our candidate was a previous councillor, a working class activist based in Dungannon. Across the constituency, we got 1.2% of the vote. A small vote, but a modest vote, but larger than many of the left votes in England and Scotland and Wales, but still a modest vote. In Dungannon, in the working class areas of Dungannon, where he's based, where the candidate is based, and where we have support, he got 20% of the vote in those areas, which is a powerful base for the future in terms of hopefully winning a council seat. So it's important. It's important because it's that patient campaigning approach on the ground, as Dave referenced in Brighton. It's very, very important. But the politics are also very important, and we all need to cohere around a commonly agreed set of principles. I think we all know that. And in Northern Ireland, in the north, that has to be about class politics being primary, taking primacy over unionism and over nationalism, independent class politics. That's very important. Otherwise, it's a form of left nationalism or a form of left unionism, and it takes us nowhere. We intend to stand in elections to come. There won't be any more elections here now for 3 years. There'll be an assembly election and local elections in May 2027, which is quite a long time away. But we do intend to stand. And we hope that what we did in this election has raised a banner that will be noticed by activists, trade unionists and activists in the other 17 constituencies. Our hope, our aspiration would be that there will be 18 candidates across the 18 assembly areas at the next assembly election. And that's what we're hoping to achieve, and then we're trying to start those conversations now. So in many ways, our approach, I think, is similar to what companies here are thinking instinctively, but with our own nuances, our own local angles, which might be slightly different. So the campaign here, this campaign, I welcome the campaign, and I think we should talk to each other, but we will be separate for the simple reason it's a separate political jurisdiction in many different ways. So, but anyway, thanks for a good discussion. A lot of questions I have in my mind. I'll be going away thinking about them.
Thanks very much, Kieran. We've just got Alan now. There's still time for just 1 or 2 more contributions if anybody wants to say anything or ask anything. Then we'll go into the sum up. So, Alan, would you like to go ahead, please?
Sure. Thank you, Pam. My name's Alan Story. I live in the village or town of Woodbridge, Suffolk. Too rich, too white, too right-wing. Anyways, I'm moving to Norwich next week, and I have good feelings about that. I'm really enthused about this meeting, I have to say. I feel quite isolated out here in Suffolk. I used to live in Sheffield for 8 years. And I'd really love to hear all these, this is all about Northern Ireland. It's really quite uplifting. And Dave and Steve, it's really, really great to be here. I'd just like to make a couple of points. I was involved in a group called Learning Our History, which what we did was we studied a number of left-wing groups since, last 25 years, and had developed very good articles, which are published in a thing called the Left Lane, a little Substack that I set up in January on the Scottish Socialist Party, a very good piece on that, and Tommy Sheridan, all that happened there. It's not really maybe too well known, and a Scottish fellow did it, Gregor Gall. We had a piece on respect, which is okay. It could have been better. The Socialist Alliance. I did then a three-party, I used to be an investigative journalist. I did a three-part expose of the Workers' Party, the outfit run by Galloway. And I have to say personally, not in a sectarian way, I'm very glad he lost. I think he's a complete tosser, really bad person to be a voice of the left. Anyways, because I talked to like some former members of the Workers' Party. You should see what it's really like inside that party. You know, like that George Galway sets policy on his Facebook page. I mean, it's really a terrible lesson in how not to build a party. I'd like to say a couple last things. I think some more people should volunteer to Pam's call for people to help and organize. I see, unless I'm missing something, I'm the only one who's put my name forward. We need people to help out this. I know we're all busy, blah, 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 but I spend 40 hours a week on the left lane. I'm sure you've got a few hours a week to help out. You know, the talents of many can really bring some good things. And the second thing is, I sort of only, this is my first meeting that I've attended of this group. It would be really helpful just to sort of give at least 90 seconds, Pam, on the way this group is organized, you know, sort of what its goals are. Maybe it's going to be in transition, changing to a new thing. But I do think it's quite important that we really reach out to new people. I'm a journalist. That's what I do all the time, is writing. And I think we really have to, one of the big problems of the left is that some self-appointed leaders sort of control things. And if you're not in that silo, you don't hear about things, you don't get invited, you don't get to talk. We want to break that down by bringing in people who are really pissed off about capitalism and want to change things. I'm personally, I've spent the last 3.5 years working on a group called Get PR Done. I know some people are not in favor of that. I think it's no cure-all, but it is the one way that the left electorally can get forward is by having a PR system of voting. It's no surprise that in all the European countries that have PR, there is left parties, you know, of different strengths. And here, the United States and Canada, where I'm from, in fact, there's no left party. There is a correlation between the voting system and whether there's a left party or not. And no left party, I'm convinced, can go very far. Yeah, the Greens they're not really left wing, but they got 4 people for this. They're not going to get to 25 next time. That's what the first past the post voting system does. It's a duopoly. It's anti-democratic. It keeps the big two in power. I've got lots more to say, but if you want to, we're having a good discussion right now. Just you put in Google the left lane, and you can join. You can see a group. We're having a discussion about just a thing we brought up today on the response to the election. So really glad to be here.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks for joining us this evening. We've just got Nigel. I think we'll make Nigel the last contribution this evening, and then I'm going to invite Felicity and Dave to make some closing comments, and I'll ask Roger Silverman to sum up. I mean, I realise some people are starting to get off now, and we really don't want you to miss the end of the meeting. So, Nigel, would you like to come in, please?
Yes, I'll be very brief. It was interesting before these elections that Tusk and the Workers' Party group, well, Tusk organised a conference down in Birmingham, which I went to. The Workers' Party group, Workers' Party of Britain, were committed themselves to avoiding standing against Tusk, you know, and vice versa. There appears to be none of that in this election. I've looked through a number of seats, and the Workers' Party stood clearly against Dave Nellis, for example, in Coventry. So they didn't honour that at all. A lot of people on the left have a lot of problems with the Workers' Party, and I think it's something we have to think about if we're going to talk about a new Workers' Party. How you orientate towards the left. I personally don't think it's looking that way. I think Tusk behaved much more, if you like, in a more credible way, although their results were really bad. They didn't break through at all. as far as I could tell from the constituencies I've looked at. So yeah, I think I've always been interested in cross-community work. We set up a community council in York around the Corbyn era, where we brought all of the groups together. We did the same with the climate change movement, and worked very effectively there. But that was kind of cut short by COVID, really. And the point being, it wasn't really with a purpose to lead. So although we got a lot of interest and a lot of people involved, a bit like Enough is Enough, which got very active in the valley where I live here in Calderdale. That's kind of run out of steam. We're now involved with the the Palestine solidarity movements and so on. So one thing kind of turns to another and turns to another and turns to another. We need a kind of consistent, as someone said, anti-capitalist message. That was very popular, as Dominic said, very popular during the climate strikes. Very, very strong support for that idea amongst very, very young people. We need a clear, if you like, uncomplicated message. An independent stood in Halifax, but unfortunately the Workers' Party of Britain stood late against her, and so I thought she did very well. But I talked to her about having a follow-up meeting and trying to build something around here. I think she was disappointed at the result, and her morale's been sapped a bit. And we've tried the building, meetings before the elections around bringing people together, fairly unsuccessfully, must be said. I think now, as Pam would have said before, because I was working with Pam, now we're in a different situation. We're in a situation we've got more time. We can be more coordinated, and let's see, and also reach out to other groups that already exist. I was pleased to hear there's someone here who'd been involved with Left Unity, and of course many of the comrades will have been involved in other organisations too. So that reaching out process really needs to be made. And broadly, people who stand on streets selling newspapers, I've done plenty of it. I have a lot of respect for people who get out and work in communities, but I'm not a lot of respect for people who are sectarians. So that's something we've got to we've got to look at, and how we're gonna get that message, and how we're going to bring people with us. Listening's been mentioned, those kind of things. Being open, not being too, deterministic in our ideas, but being clear where the red lines are. Let's be frank, comrades. We've got to be clear on that. So there's some tolerance required as well as principle. That's all.
Okay, thanks very much, Nigel. Right, so if we can now go to Felicity, followed by Dave. If you could just make some closing comment, perhaps as near to 3 or 4 minutes as you can, if that's okay. You there, Felicity? Felicity? Right.
It's all right now. They were saying the host won't let you unmute.
What's going on there? Right.
I don't know what's going on with my camera either. First of all, I want to say we need to keep the conversation going. It's been a useful and constructive conversation. It needs to continue. The second thing I'd say is the youngsters are organised. People say this is an older people's meeting, but there are lots and lots of youngsters out there who are very firmly anti-capitalist and very much know what Starmer's about. And we do need to build links with young people. We need to plan. We need to be thinking ahead, thinking not just a year, but 2-3 years ahead, because we know that Starmer says he's going to make everything happen by pushing growth, and capitalism is not going to like him doing that. It's not going to happen. And all kinds of crises are going to happen. So to stop people feeling that they're completely at sea, there has to be the voice of socialism put over in the local areas. WhatsApp groups are fine, but also by leaflets through the door to people as to put socialist ideas forward, not preaching at them, but on the basis of the kind of issues that they want. Left Unity is very much trying to build as many links as possible to as many groups as possible to try and bring people in together to talk. We're not saying we know the answers, but we're saying, you know, we've got a lot of contacts. We can bring people in together to talk and to discuss. Working on the street, never mind selling a newspaper that's, you know, decided by a small group of self-selected people in the middle of the organisation, but working on the street in campaigns, I think, is essential for any socialist mental health. You have to actually realise that you can talk to people and they do listen and they do tell you things and you can learn from them, and it's a way of working. The biggest part of the campaigning that I do at the moment is the NHS. Any of you interested in the NHS campaigns, please get in touch. It's going to be absolutely crucial that we're organised on that issue as widely as we possibly can be. And we put forward ideas. We took in Merseyside and Cheshire, which is our ICS area, we took a big van around with great big slogans about the NHS during the election. And when people were saying, you know, they're all the same, there's nothing we can do about it, our answer was, well, how did women get to vote? How did slaves get to end slavery? You know, don't think that if you can't, people make the change, and you've got to be that kind of a person that makes the change. And it was very, very well received. We had a lovely time. And as I say, that it feeds into your own enthusiasm for the campaigning if you're getting out talking to people and getting a response from it. But I mean, on the issue of Northern Ireland, I probably would be joining you in campaigning for a workers' position. I still, though, Liverpool's has its own sectarian past. I am still delighted to see unionists getting a battering, like I'm delighted to see Tories getting a battering, even though no Starmer's not going to be any better for us. But I thank you for the meeting. A final point I'd say is, if you want to actually talk to young people, it's got to be an eco-socialist approach. It matters so much to young people. The idea that they're not going to, that there won't be a viable ecosystem in this country, or, you know, in other countries, unless there's action on the climate, is a very basic issue. And if anyone's going to be in Durham this weekend, I hopefully bump into you at the miners' rally. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Felicity. And I'll be at the miners' gala this weekend, so I'll catch up with you.
Great.
Dave, would you like to sum up now?
Yeah, I won't need my 4 or 5 minutes, he promised. Yeah, it's not just, our intervention is, of course, not just agitational, it is also organisational. And so Felicity talks about keeping the conversation going and about keeping the organisation going. And in Brighton and Hove, that's exactly what we're going to do. Tomorrow night, we've got a meeting of the 15 people of the core campaign, the 15 people who did the most and organised some of the 14 different WhatsApp groups. Oh, did I learn? My God, I've never been in a campaign like this before. It was a young people's campaign. So it's the organisation will continue. We've got a social event coming up. Probably 50 to 100 people will come in a couple of weeks' time. So the message is we carry on. And we're also talking about actually fighting the next election. We are not primarily an electoralist body. You know, there's plenty of critiques of electoralism, but there's also plenty of critiques about why it's useful to win elections. So somebody, I forget who, said, we won't get 25 MPs. You don't know. I mean, something, I don't want to bore you, but Lenin, a favourite quote of mine, there are decades when nothing happens. There are weeks when decades happen. Who knows if in 5 years or 3 years' time we might not get a large number of independent socialist, independent left members of parliament. And that brings me to my final point, which is about the United Front. A number of comrades have mentioned that. And I want to pick up on something Dominic said, quite very wisely, I thought. You know, a lot of these young folk a lot of the people have never been involved in party politics or electoral politics before. They're single or double issue folk: National Health Service, Gaza, ecosystem, etc., or various other, many multifold different little campaigns. And as Dominic said, and as, if you don't mind me quoting, as Marx and Trotsky and Rosa Luxemburg have said, our job is to develop class consciousness, is to develop the idea of us being a class for ourselves, working in class interest, not simply an economic, socio-economic bloc. So as Dominic was saying, that's the third time I've mentioned Dominic, we have to, in our meetings, in our agitations, in our organisations, we have to locate those individual tragedies and dramas and events within a Marxist analysis. I don't suppose more than a tiny percentage of people in the Gaza protests actually are aware that that is, as a result, what's happening in Gaza is a result of capitalist imperialism, and we can give that and many other issues, locate those issues and horrific developments, including poverty. I grew up in poverty, including poverty, put those developments within an anti-capitalist, a Marxist analysis. Thank you, comrades. I really enjoyed this meeting. Great meeting.
Thanks very much, Dave. So can we go to Roger now for a summing up?
Yeah, thank you, comrades. I think it's been an absolutely brilliant and inspiring meeting, and thank all the comrades for your participation. I'd like to say first something in reply to John Donne. John Donne represents absolutely the most heroic traditions of the miners' strike, the most heroic traditions of the working class. And I understand why, after all the defeats and all the betrayals, why and also all the vices of the sectarian groups and so on, why he's a little sceptical. But I would like to say why I think actually is a thirst for a united mass fight back. Yes, we don't see signs of a mass workers' party at the present time, but I think what we're seeing now is the calm before the storm. The atmosphere is absolutely electric. Why do I think that the prospects are so overripe for a new mass workers' party? Because, as they say in science, nature abhors a vacuum, so also politics abhors a vacuum. When there is a vacuum, the one huge gap in politics, in society today, is a party of the working class and a party straining for a new socialist society. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, let's look at the significance of this so-called landslide victory of the Labour Party. Labour had the support, and do comrades realise this? Labour had the support of just 20.1% of the registered voters in this country. Even among the less than 60% who actually voted, Labour and the Tory party together got just 57.4% of the vote. That's the lowest, I think comrades mentioned, since we had universal suffrage. The lowest turnout and the lowest vote for the main parties. Labour's voters dropped from 12.9 million in 2017, which represented a huge advance under Corbyn over the last few elections, to 10.3 million in 2019, to 9.7 million in 2024. So the Labour base is slipping away. That's one of the reasons why there's a vacuum, and one of the reasons why that vacuum needs to be filled sooner or later by a workers' party. How did Labour win an overwhelming majority of seats? Only because in 2019 the Tories had an electoral pact with Farage's Brexit party, which gave them a huge vote, 14 million votes. This time, true, it had gone down to under 11 million votes, but the total vote for the Tories plus Reform still exceeded Labour's by 1.2 million. What a fantastic landslide victory of the Labour Party, as the press are trying to portray it. The most significant features of this general election result are: one, the record low turnout; two, the high vote for none of the above candidates, and that again is a sign that there is a vacuum, there is a gap, there is which needs to be filled by a genuine mass party of the working class. But we had not just the votes for Reform, but the votes for the Lib Dems, who got their highest number of seats, I think, in living memory; the Independents, who got about, I think, 9; Corbyn's huge majority; the near misses in Ilford and Chingford and some of the other areas that comrades have mentioned; and of course, most ominously, the 4 million votes for the racist, far-right Reform Party. Now, Britain, I'm afraid we have to see this. It's falling in line with the rest of Europe and with the USA and beyond of the resurgence in desperation and despair of the failure of the left, of the development of a far right. Despite their setback in Sunday's second round vote, the French far right almost doubled their representation in Parliament. And the far right are in government, from Finland and Sweden to Italy and Portugal, and soon perhaps in Germany and in Spain. And in Britain, the Tory split is coming very soon, and a realignment, and maybe even a fusion of the two parties. Johnson has already purged ruthlessly the old patrician establishment Tories, the Clarks and the Heseltines and so on. It's the end of centuries of traditional Tory rule. But despite its own hollow parliamentary victory, it's the end of Labour too, as a party that even nominally reflects the needs and aspirations of the working class. Because, as I say, there's this huge gap in British politics. The 500,000 who surged into Labour under Corbyn, we need a mass left alternative. And we know that however much we love and respect Jeremy Corbyn, he never had any intention of creating an alternative party. Having, to his utter surprise, won the leadership, he considered it his responsibility and his priority to hold the party together and to avoid a split. And it was, of course, a responsibility and objective ruthlessly and viciously stamped out by the right wing. He stood as an independent and got a tremendous victory, which itself is a guarantee, or at least a testimony to the probable success of a new mass left party on a national scale. But he did that not in defiance of Starmer, but in the hope of reinstatement into the fold, as had happened previously in a different era with Ken Livingstone. And Galloway too, I agree with comrades who say he doesn't offer any hope. He's shamelessly running after the white xenophobic vote. I support British values, British troops, stopping immigration and all this sort of thing, and simultaneously chasing the Muslim vote. Not only quite correctly expressing solidarity with the population of Gaza, but also defending the horrible, medieval, theocratic Iranian regime. So the same with all the myriad new formations, all striving to fill the gap and unite the left, with the best of intentions, certainly with good intentions, but they lack a solid organic base. They revolve around well-meaning individuals. They remain on the sidelines and often in competition with each other. And as Steve said at the beginning, and some comrades repeated it, the point is we want a programme and not a leader. We're after a programme and not a leader. We want a political banner, a political way forward, and not just revolving around this or that charismatic or sometimes not so charismatic individuals. So I think the scepticism that some comrades feel is misplaced, because look what we've seen. In the last year or two, we've had a rise in strikes and in trade union militancy, and look who was involved mainly: railway workers, nurses, doctors, teachers, lawyers. And you know something? None of these groups of workers are affiliated to the Labour Party. And they will find as did the trade unionists in Britain 125 years ago, that they need a political voice. And where will they turn? Are they going to turn to Starmer's Labour Party? They will have to find a way to organise themselves and to get representation politically. And then what about the other sections of the working class who are still organised in Labour Party affiliated unions? What about Unite, Unison, the GMB, etc., etc.? Yes, it won't be the top union bureaucrats of these organisations who will force a break with Starmer, but surely there will be a growing outcry from active rank-and-file militants within these unions saying, why are we paying our hard-earned wages, our hard-earned affiliation fees to this anti-union bosses government? Maybe it won't be immediately. Maybe it'll take some time for that to percolate. But we need to outgrow the curse of harmful, childish sectarian traditions. In my constituency, for instance, we had 6 competing left candidates, all under various guises. And we stuck, this is a new one I'm talking about, Stratford and Bow, we stuck solidly with Steve Hedley, who was an exemplary candidate, the chair of the local trades council, a proven, dedicated, militant trade union leader. And that was against all the assorted parvenus who had national campaigns and came in and really parachuted into the constituency without consulting the local activists or the local trade union militants. In France, it was the growing threat from the far right which overcame the old sectarian divisions to join forces and to establish a united front. But here too, despite the alarming growth of the far rights throughout Europe and beyond, the workers are not defeated. What can we do? We can organise, mobilise, campaign, link up our struggles together, launch a rank-and-file campaign for the creation of a party really representing the interests of the working class, the interests of Labour. The cartoonist of the 30s and 40s, David Lowe, who I think was the greatest cartoonist, only perhaps rivaled by Alan Hardman later, but David Lowe used to draw the trade unions as a cart horse, powerful, solid, but very slow and very ponderous. Let's plan for a conference of activists without regard to political affiliation, but trade union militants, activists, campaigners in and out, within the trade unions and in other mass organisations, tenants' organisations, particular lobby groups, and so on. Let's get try to plan and build up support for a conference of activists without regard to their political affiliation, members of this or that group, political organisation, sect, it doesn't matter. But to give the cart horse a spur to take that step and build a mass party of the working class. So thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much, Roger, for that summing up. Well, that's the end of the discussion for today. From the point of view of the chair, I've got to compliment the comrades on the very comradely manner in which everybody has treated each other. I've noticed that people actually are interacting, people are commenting on what each other is saying. And I see a complete absence of some of the sectarianism that I've observed in various left groups and organisations I've drifted through. So I feel very optimistic. I think this is a very, very good start. I'm very optimistic about the future. You will be hearing from us fairly soon. Keep an eye on your spam box because your inbox may not recognise the email address initially. And we'll be in touch very soon. Please consider getting involved with the committee to organise this. We do need some more people on. And respond to that effect when you get your email. So I just basically say, thanks very much for your attendance. It's been a great meeting, solidarity, and we'll see you again very soon.